My name is Jim Tamlyn. I'm chairman of the Emmet County Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Commissioners is the owner of this lighthouse. The lighthouse was built in 1868. It was turned on in 1869, and then the lighthouse was turned off in 1906 because they had built another lighthouse closer to the South Channel, and this lighthouse was no longer used. So for the last 100 years, this lighthouse has been a private home. Emmet County purchased it 3 years ago with the goal of putting it back as an 1890s lighthouse. We applied to the federal government for a private aids to navigation. They approved it, and so it's back on all the NOAA charts as an active lighthouse. It has a signature of a 1-second flash, 4 seconds of darkness, and it repeats. We have 400 feet of shoreline, 10.5 acres, all overlooking the bridge. And then we also own, right adjacent to this piece of property, 770 acres and over 2 miles of shoreline at the headlands. So we've got a lot of property which is protected forever for all the citizens of any of the countries to come and enjoy. And the last 3 weeks we just went through the book, and we found 43 states had visited this lighthouse, people from 43 states and 4 countries just in the last 3 weeks. So it's a very busy lighthouse, and people absolutely love it. The big rock is right at the base of the property we own. In 1749, the French government sent someone here, a gentleman, and I'm probably killing the name, Labinaire, to analyze what the French government had here at this fort. And he came here and looked at the piece of property and wrote a large report back to France. It was pretty brutal. He described the French people here as the laziest French people he had ever seen. They hadn't caulked their homes properly, but he talked about the soils, he talked about the water, he talked about the natives. He also talked about a large rock, which is on the beach here. And that rock he described as being about 7 feet tall, and he said the Indians sometimes tell me the rock is high and dry, and other times it's completely underwater, which led him to believe that the Great Lakes cycled up and down as much as 8 feet. And we see that today. Actually today, probably over a 20-year period, the lakes will rise up and down as much as 5 feet. So the rock was described in his letter. The rock was also a focal point of the missionaries in the 1600s. So we tongue-in-cheek challenged Plymouth Rock that our rock is older than your rock, and so one of the Detroit papers picked up on the story and did a big story on our rock, and of course the Boston Globe followed back and did a big story on their rock, and so it just a little tongue-in-cheek good PR for both of us to talk about the rocks. We've only been open 3 summers, and every year the viewership doubles, and mostly it's word of mouth. The people absolutely they come out here and they just love it, and they go back and they tell their friends, and we'll hear, well, our neighbors were here last year and they told us what a wonderful lighthouse this was. And it's just a warm, friendly little lighthouse that got a lot of the piece of property has a lot of history, and that's where we will work in the future on what was here and how do we put interpretive displays up and let everyone have a chance to see that, because that history belongs to all of us. Patrick McGulpin homesteaded this piece of property. Patrick McGulpin came with the British in 1761 when they took over this fort from the French. And he was a British soldier. When his term was up, rather than go back to Great Britain, he stayed here and homesteaded the property. He married an Indian woman, which was quite common at the time. They had 7 children and she died. He then married a French woman and had 9 more children. So the McGulpins had a very large family. They were very active. They were very active in the French and Indian Wars, and they were also active in the War of 1812. And they, like I say, they had homesteaded this property and in 1811, this was one of the, this piece of property had been ceded to the United States by the Indians. This area, the Detroit area, Mackinac Island, and some of the St. Ignace area, they were the only pieces of Michigan that could actually be owned by citizens. And Patrick McGulpin applied to a federal court in the Detroit area, who then agreed with him and sent his request back on to Washington, where President James Madison signed off on it. And in 1811, he was granted a deed for 640 acres here. The Indians, his first wife being Indian, the Indians knew him. His family was half Indian blood, and so he traded with them. He provided them shelter. He provided them food, and there was a letter written when one of his daughters married in Wisconsin, and it said the McGulpins were revered because they spoke all Indian dialects, plus they spoke French and they spoke English. So they were, anyone could stop here, and it was, you know, without newspapers or TVs, this was where everyone got their news. This was a very active little spot.